1, Group 2. Let's start with a quick introduction of who we are. Daniel, why don't you go first?
Okay, my name is Daniel. I am in my second last semester till I graduate in December. This is my last class before I get my emergency management certificate, and I get my master's in Homeland Security in December. Um, I am a parole officer. I've been a parole officer for the state of Texas for about 2 years now, and how emergency management, how I am involved in emergency management every day. I am part of the CERT team in Walker County. We respond to lost children, forest fires, storm shelters, stuff like that. And that's it.
Andre?
Hi, I'm Ivy. I work for the police department in Record. I've been there for 5 years. I am supposed to graduate in May, fingers crossed. And I working in a police department. We respond to emergencies. We're in a flood area, so I'm always on call. If something were to happen, they can call me whenever they need.
Awesome. So I'm Beck. I'm emergency management and critical infrastructure. I am currently doing an internship in Houston for a company that builds and designs infrastructure plans and access control for ports, airports, schools, all different kinds of infrastructure. And then I, on a day-to-day basis, I am involved in emergency management because I get to plan for works in my internship and try to figure out different ways. Let's start with question 1. Based on the theory, discuss differences in function, characteristics, and outcome of short versus long recovery process. Which perspective processes are more difficult to achieve in your view and why? Daniel?
I think first off, we need to identify how long is long term and how long is short term, right? Short term is you're ranging from weeks, and long term you're ranging from weeks to months to from months to years. Short term, I think the main goal of short term is to restore liveliness in the community. When I say liveliness, I'm talking about the key critical infrastructure in the community. You're talking about water, electric, power, communications, telecommunications, transportation, medical. These are the main goals when you're looking at short-term recovery. You're talking about, in terms of transportation, you're looking at removing debris on the road, making transportation routes accessible. You're looking at restoration of power, drainage, water, telecommunications. You're looking at trying to repair these areas that are damaged, so these are in function and in operation. Also, you're looking at medical. You're looking at obviously search and rescues, distribution of donations, coordination between agencies, distribution of volunteers. You're talking about how you incorporate the Red Cross, the Cajun Navy, stuff like that, certain response team, all into the recovery process in the midst of this disaster. Um, Long-term wise, you're looking at trying to rebuild the economy, and also I think the main goal of long-term recovery is to return to normalcy pre-disaster conditions, and then subsequently increase the level of resilience in that community. Um, how we do this? We do that by revising the flood plans, revising building codes, um, uh, implementing community assistance programs, such as reaching out to victims for business loans, job assistance, disaster relief, and long-term housing for displacement of the victims. Obviously, you're also looking at long-term health concerns. I think recently with the Harvey stuff going on, um, if I read correctly, people were suffering from asthma and stuff like that 6 months, 8 months later after Harvey. Um, so if you, I don't think there is a more important recovery phase in terms of long term or short term. Um, it's difficult to say which one's more difficult to achieve. Short term, you're looking at an ad hoc response. Long term requires more planning, coordination, collaboration with other agencies. Um, Basically, public involvement as well goes a long way in long term recovery. So for me, if you ask me which one's more difficult, it's really difficult to say. Both are equally difficult, in my opinion.
I think some of the processes with the law that are challenging is that how long it takes. It's not up and like in the short term. And as we said, Katrina, people left the recovery, and they didn't have the long term goals of another process that's difficult is the temporary change that be needed during the long-term recovery. As the damage is too great, like had furniture opening up or Katrina, they went to the supermarket and they're not for people who stay there.
Great. Some examples that I kind of wanted to expand on were repair to damage critical infrastructure. We saw that both in Katrina and in Harvey. I saw quite a bit with the removal of debris in Montgomery County. We had dump sites where residents would take all of their trash and all of their destroyed homes and leave them at the dump site. There, they would sort everything and then take it away. So our county has significantly less residual trash than, say, some other counties in like Bridge City. They still have trash all over the roadway.
I think, Andrea, one thing you said that kind of got my attention is that the lack of long-term planning caused a lot of New Orleans residents to not come back. I think that's also due to a lot of Okay, never mind. I'll get back to that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daniel, have you seen any long-term recovery process in your own county after disaster?
There's an increase, definitely an increase. I think the superstorm last year with Harvey kind of was a wake-up call for the, I guess, Houston area, that it's occurring more often and more severe each time. So I think when I'm looking at my county, when I'm involved with the Walker County CERT team, we are trying to more aggressively recruit volunteers and train them in flood management, like storm shelters, managing of storm shelters, displaced victims when their house is flooded up. We're trying to coordinate with churches, other schools, stuff like that, to have an option if needed, in case of an event where the storm shelter is unable to. I think, if I'm not wrong, the storm shelter at Walker County can only hold about 100 people. And then after that, we're relying on churches, schools. So we're definitely aggressively trying to engage more people in the community to come out and volunteer, because we have, as we can see in Harvey and Houston, Houston had so many volunteers coming in to the Reliance Stadium to volunteer, but there was so many volunteers being turned away because, first of all, emergency management officials didn't know what these people are capable of, what their daily jobs are, what kind of resources, what kind of skills they have. But I think when you look at the CERT team, you can understand you can look at the CERT team and have I guess that they have some kind of training in CPR, triage, medical triage, stuff like that, just how to manage a storm shelter, and that would benefit a situation like Reliance Stadium, where they had so many people coming in every day, volunteer management, donations management, so I think in terms of how this has affected, it's definitely affected, where we are trying to get more trained volunteers.
Andrew, have you seen either short-term or long-term efforts in your own area that differ from Daniel's?
Well, expanding I didn't know until I started taking a few of my classes that we even had one. I think that we could learn from Daniel's statement, including more civilians, to get more volunteers, because like I said, to the survey, no one would know about it. And I think that can help our long-term and short-term recovery, being able to help volunteers.
All right. Question 2. Ruben stated, I have completed the research and knowledge base in the realm of long-term recovery is seriously inadequate to the needs we face today. Using your article, provide evidence, specific examples of challenges to long-term recovery faced by research practitioners and policymakers.
So I guess the difference between the three of those, you have researchers who, according to Smith and Wegner, scholars have addressed fundamental questions with practitioners. There has been a bill to establish an integrated framework, and policymakers states are more likely to develop free plan than local government.
I think it just lacks research. The main thing is there's not much based on the readings. There's really not much research on recovery process, and I think for one reason is that it hasn't had the time to do research on it. You know, every time there's Harvey, and then there's Katrina, and then you don't have enough time to look at, because you can't do just a research on a 2-year process. When you're looking at long term, you can't. It has to be. You have to look at it, you know, in a 1-year perspective on how post disaster has affected this community, and then 3 years, 5 years, and then ultimately 10 years. You know, and then, but I think when we look at the recovery research, it hasn't had the opportunity to, I guess, really had that timeline. You know, after Katrina, and then you have a superstorm in Harvey. Well, that's almost 10 years, but then, you know, do they just, I guess, you know, drop the Katrina research and then go on to Harvey next? I mean, it's just, there's just not enough research on recovery process, the recovery phase.
I love that you brought up the superstorm. How do you think emergency officials would plan for an active supervolcano, much like the one in Yellowstone National Park?
Well, I really haven't had much experience with volcanoes. I mean, I've been in Houston all my life, well, most of my life. I don't know. I mean, I guess we can look at Hawaii, right? I think in the case of a volcano, right, you're looking at absolute dissolution of the entire community. There's really no remnants of whatever's left after a volcano. You know, it just burns and destroys everything in its path. It's almost, you can't go back and remove that volcanic, you know, volcanic particles off the road. You're affecting the ecosystem, and when you, like in the event of a volcano like Hawaii, I think Hawaii has a lot of is big on not only tourism but fishing. You know, with all these volcanic ashes, you're destroying the ecosystem over there, and that affects the economy big time. And you know, you're looking at Hawaii being affected on tourism. On, I guess, don't quote me, but the main two economy, the main two industries that stimulate their economy: tourism and, you know, fishing. So when you look at that, and Puerto Rico, with the floods, how do you respond or recover from things like that? Because they're in islands. They're just, you know, isolated in islands. The only way for you to evacuate people is really by air or by sea. And in terms of Puerto Rico, you don't, you know, depending on the weather, whether the weather permits boats to come through, you know, that's a factor that we, you know, emergency officials have to consider too. So I guess
there's not enough research. I agree with your statement. We haven't had any major volcanoes in
mainland,
at least recently, for us to go back and study. At least none as big as a supervolcano in here.
right?
Andrew, why do you believe states are more likely to have a plan than local governments? Do you believe that a strong enough social capital investment makes local plans stronger?
I believe one of the problems with why states are more likely to have a plan than local government is that local governments are required to, and oftentimes when they're in a situation, they don't have the funding to make that happen. Can get money. They have consistency now.
Great. Let's move on to the next question. Continuity of operation planning. What is the difference between emergency operation planning and continuity of operating planning?
Continuity of operations planning, according to FEMA, it's an agency that maintains a high level of readiness. And it can be implemented without warning. The agency to be operational within 12 hours and continue to monitor those conditions to 30 days. Emergency planning is more just how are you going to respond and recover from the
Continuity of operation plan, according to the text, is divided in 4 phases, right? Readiness and preparedness, activation, relocation, continuity of operations, and reconstitution. For phase 1, readiness and preparation, it's basically emergency planning. You're preparing the community, doing awareness meetings in community council meetings, preparing storm shelters, preparing churches, schools to be able to have the resources in event that they have to hold displaced victims of the disaster. And second phase is activation and relocation. I want to also put in that it's an anticipation of a disaster to come. So we're looking at setting up communications that are in place. You're talking about plan A, plan B, plan C. You're obviously, I think when in a disaster, it's important to tell everybody that, hey, there's a disaster coming. For example, look at the Hawaii's notification of like the bomb threat. It got basically statewide notification of a bomb threat. But what if that's down, right? What if that's down? We have our cell phones, but what if that's down? We also have our Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is backup. What if that's down? We have radio, but then what if that's down? So the list can go on, and I think we eventually run out of how we can communicate. But these are anticipation, of a disaster coming in, and in this phase, communication is everything. It's basically coordination. In order for coordination to happen between other agencies, other countries, communication is key. Next phase is the continuity of operations. It's basically the continuation of medical services, law enforcement, hospitals, stuff like that, and also emergency management. How I guess the relocations of uh, emergency officials according to the geographic unaffected areas. And then lastly is the last phase is the reconstitution, basically going back to pre-disaster conditions or even better. Yeah, so I guess the main difference is emergency planning. It's more in phase 1, and you can see some in phase 2. And continuity of operation planning, it's more, you can see it more in phase 3 and 4.
Whitworth identified 9 elements of contingency operations plan. What are they? Which ones are the most crucial? And your view and why?
So some of this is going to overlap with Daniel's last comment, but number 1 is plans and procedures. Make sure you have a plan to establish. Again, like up and ready in 12 hours and continue working back to 30 days. You want to make sure you have backup employees that can't come in. They have family problems they have to deal with. It's also good to have a connection to neighboring entities. If they're not linked to the incident, they can be more helpful, level-headed. Next is identification of essential functions and activities. You'll want to determine what must say and what must be done. And I don't mean physically equipment, but procedures you continue on with. What do you not? Like I said, I work on records, and if something were to happen, I'm going to be turned over to dispatch for an phone call. Will they handle the emergency call? Next, build authority. Everyone should share their role during the disaster or emergency, and you need to report to. Make training for responsibilities, and that will help eliminate confusion when it comes to during an event. Orders of succession before have key position titles, kind of similar to an these positions are documented and distributed so that everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what the titles are and who they need to respond to. Alternate facility. Make sure you have a place to go. Make sure if needed, security requirements are met. And there's 2 different types of alternate facility. You have your hot site, which are fully equipped and ready to go. And then your field sites, which require setup, are still functional. Number 6 is interoperable communications. Be able to communicate and have other plans. If your phone or internet, that's kind of where Daniel was talking about. Okay, well, what do you do if your phone's down, internet goes down? You can do this. Have phone trees and make sure the microphone is sat down. Don't be above going to knocking on door to door. Next, records and database. Make sure you have hard copies and back up your electronic data because if you have a flood and all your paperwork gets flooded, you want to make sure you have an alternative source. 8 is test training and exercises. We want to have annual training with essential functions at alternative sites. We want to make sure you can go and everything works. Quarterly notification. So, if you're sending out texts or doing a phone tree, or make sure that those work. And then you want to brief with an actual review. Go over what worked, what didn't, what changes can be made. And then last implementation of continuity of operation plans. And that's just knowing when to plan and when to. From personal experience, I believe that all are needed to be successful. After Hurricane Franco, police department moved this place due to the window damage to our building. It was nothing compared to what Houston had to deal with. But our detectives came in and they were unable to work with their tasks on the damage. And we started to find a place to go. Once we did some more examination of the building, we found out that everyone needed to accept evidence, and that is because we had no place to transfer our evidence to. Dispatch located the other side of San Antonio, which was approximately an hour one way from most of them on a good day. And we had to find the flight because we had to do their extra if they were sending gas. And so we kind of putting up, and we're actually doing the consequences of having to pay this money. We're over our budget. Records come up with a temporary vault over at the PD. We have a fire vault. And we couldn't transfer. I mean, we've done hundreds of years. We can't transfer all those records. We had to determine what went with us what day. And now, supposedly, we're supposed to stop this end of September, October. So you're looking at a long-term recovery for us. And this is just putting that very big debate over what we want.
Any thoughts, Randy? Randy?
I think the most important to me would be the testing, training, and exercise. What good is a plan if the plan isn't tested and retested? It's the scientist in me. If I have a hypothesis, I need to prove it. If it works more than one time, I also need to know how to respond to different variables. Not necessarily every disaster will ever be the same. Actually, all of them will be slightly different. Being able to adapt to different types of variables and challenges instead of addressing just one idea would make the entire team a little bit more cohesive and be able to address those threats or those vulnerabilities or those challenges. One of the classes that I take for TEACH was it's called Disaster Preparedness for Hospitals and Healthcare Organizations. And earlier, Andrea, she mentioned the facilities and finding alternate facilities. The requirements that go into that for medical facilities is pretty intense. They had to be able to go in and find facilities that had restrooms, had spaces for break room, had power. It's not just oh, we're gonna pop up a tent right here and triage everybody. It's pretty involved. In our area, I now drive around town and think, okay, if there was a major disaster, where would some good places be to put an alternate facility? And for at least in this area, there's a Kroger right around the corner that has plenty of floor space, place for people to actually take breaks in a break room, restrooms. So the whole process is being able to take needs and meet them. And I think that the ultimate facility and the training is learning how to take a need and figure out how to make it work.
It's funny how you said that. How using like private businesses as a alternate facility. During Harvey, me and my group of friends, we were putting people at Whataburger down the street. The whole street was flooded, and we were just trying to get people out of flooded homes. So we put them in Whataburger. I don't know what we were thinking, but eventually, Whataburger shut down. I mean, they wanted to close. They didn't want anybody there anymore, so they kicked out all the children, all the old, the elderly. They were just like, "Hey, you guys gotta leave, and you're on your own, pretty much." So I think in that, when we look at that, we also have to look at the corporation of these private businesses, because it's not just to us. We're looking at looking to survive. Residents, they're just trying to survive, trying to get out of their wet homes, trying to get into shelters. But when in the perspective of the business, it's money. They're losing money just being open. They're losing money because of security purposes, profits, whatever you want to call it. But so I think these are all part of your planning process, where we are, establishing all these before, Whataburger establishing a policy, in times of disaster. What are they going to do? Are they going to keep letting people in, or just close altogether and just not even let people in? Because then now you're looking at, children that are 4 or 5 years old, and elderly people on walkers that have no place to go, no transport, and absolutely no, they're just out on the streets with medical conditions and all kinds of stuff, and so, if private businesses have those policies in place, these situations can be avoided by just kicking, young children and elderly out.
For the next question, what are the key components of the Business Continuity Information Network for Rapid Disaster Recovery Model? How do you think this model can be used most useful to strengthen collaboration between businesses and emergency management entities? Do you think this model can be used for short-term or long-term recovery, and why? I identified the key concepts, and Andrea identified the components. I'm going to go through mine first. The key concepts of critical communication, that's the communication from the community, the business, to emergency management operations, both inside and outside the disaster area. 2 was local damage assessment, and that's the assessments conducted by officials. And 3, the recovery plan execution is identify and execute recovery plan. They're effective, easy to use, real-time communication. Do I believe the system is beneficial? Absolutely. Any tool that can aid in communication during crisis is a great tool. Having a database with massive amounts of information available in real time save lives. Several years ago, I was third-party bookkeeper for several fire departments. These public entities, therefore, they had to have an open book policy. However, they were one of the hardest clients I had to share community or information. So my question was, in general, how many companies or people would invest their time and invest in the program? I'm not sure why. But it was almost a rivalry between the first responders. So I'm sure that the same mentality could still be applied to companies, businesses, people that don't want to share their information because it's private and personal.
Well, and I think that's why the Business Continuity Information Network came up with these key components, and a big thing that is information. There are 5 components. There's disaster management space, and you want to be able to communicate between the business, emergency management, and it all comes back to information share. That's kind of what we believe led to 9/11, that nobody wanted to share information. Communication and information sharing is one of our next is disaster resources and you want to know what resources are necessary and can be used for emergency preparation. This comes from businesses know where to find supplies, such as just for fuel, boards. Next is situation awareness, and this is an emergency management where the incident struck and threat levels, and is also about an interactive. Obviously, with the attack, you're tracking it. Like a hurricane, time, where supposed to hit, how bad it's going to be, and you need to evacuate. Next is dynamic management. This is the communications between businesses and emergency management. It allows the finding and growing the network. So trying to reach out to businesses, other departments, next is intelligent decision systems. And you want to determine how best to assist, looking at incidents data. This network is best used for long-term recovery due to it focusing on all aspects of the recovery and not just restoring the heritage.
I think.
What would this look like?
I think the example that Whitney used has potential. Using an online portal accessible to everybody. The response. You can have a constant turnover rate with managers and supervisors, and that could be a problem. You know, one manager wants to participate, the new one doesn't. You know, yes, you may have an owner, but sometimes that's the point of share so they can express all your opinions. So it has potential. It would need some work. You know, is there, do you offer incentives for these businesses? You know, do they get priority in rebuilding the system? No. And you also have to worry about if you have this type of information, they're not going to want to share it with civilians. You know, they're not seen as able to handle what emergency management deals with.
Just want to touch real quick on the BCIN model. I think for the first three components, you're dealing with a lot of short term. But I think the long term recovery process encompasses all components from 1 to 5. You know, it's long term, you ultimately want to get a collaborative goal in businesses to try to achieve some form of understanding between each other and sharing of information, more or less like a fusion of information, you know, a setup when you're talking about the EOC. When you form an EOC in the event of a disaster, the EOC already has all that information, who to contact. When you're talking about this business, they have a immediate person to contact, stuff like that. And I think we're running out of time.
Yes, we are. So I would like to ask one final conclusion question, and I just want your feedback on how you think the discussion went. No more than a minute to give your feedback. Daniel?
I think it went smooth. We prepared it in a sense where we had the questions out and we, you know, had the Google document out. That way we knew what we were going to talk, and basically a transcript of what was being discussed and what our answers were going to be, what we were going to be asked. So that way we were more prepared, saving a lot of, giving more discussion time, I guess. So I think that was very beneficial to this discussion. Good idea, Randy.
Yes, very good idea. It made it so much easier, especially issues hearing everyone. So it made it a little easier.
Any constructive criticism at all?
Say that one more time.
Any constructive criticism?
Not for me.
Okay.
Andrew?
Much.
All right, that's it. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.